Tonight, we're here with registered dietitian Judy Palken to learn about healthy planet eating. This program is co-sponsored by the Centerville Library, the Eldridge Library, and the Brewster Ladies Library Association and its members. So we're going to learn about how we can all make sustainable and ethical food choices that will benefit our planet and
In the
all
third drawer,
inhabitants.
there's a John.
Yeah.
In the third drawer is something.
I am going to ask everyone to mute themselves. Okay. We will explore several ways of making good choices for us and the planet, looking at the foods we choose, decisions we make while shopping, and reducing what we waste in our kitchens. Please come and join us in this important class about eating for the health of our planet. And a little bit about our presenter, Judy. She is a registered dietitian who translates the science of nutrition into practical recommendations. In her classes, Judy teaches how great food choices and other healthful behaviors can reduce inflammation, promote good health, and help us to feel our best. She uses fine art paintings to convey her messages and inspire great choices. So thank you everyone again for being here. I'm going to turn it over to Judy.
Thank you, Devin. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I'm glad to see several of you here. I'm so glad to be back with the Brewster Ladies Library. So this class combines two topics that I feel passionately about, and I'm betting maybe you do too, healthy eating choices and how to make good decisions for our planet. Usually when I'm talking about healthy food choices, I'm talking about how we can eat to personally be healthier, reduce our risk of disease, treat an illness if we have it, maybe, control weight. But this class is a bit different. It's looking at our food choices in a different way, how we look at the health of our very precious planet. There is a handout that has not everything I'm going to say, but a lot of it, a lot of the high points, so that you don't feel, if you were inclined to, that you need to write everything down. And I'm not sure, Devin, whether people have the handout yet or whether that comes later. But if you're registered for the class, you'll receive the handout.
I will send that after the program.
Okay, and I hope that is helpful to people if you want it, if you want to, save some of the information. So here is what I plan to talk about. Very simple. There's three major topics. I'm going to talk about good food choices for our planet Earth. I'm going to talk about reducing food waste in our kitchens, also reducing non-food waste in our kitchens. And then finally, not really a separate topic, but kind of woven throughout, as Devin mentioned, I like to show paintings. If you've been to any of my classes, you know that I like to show fine art paintings. I think they're beautiful, and I think they help me to get my points across better than maybe my words can. So I hope you enjoy the paintings. And I'm actually going to start with a painting. So this, I think this is a beautiful painting, even though the lady looks sad or anxious. This is by Chaim Soutine, who he was from what we now call Belarus, and he kind of worked his way to Paris in the early 1900s, like a lot of artists did. And he was of the school of expressionist artists. This came after the Impressionists. And actually, my Zoom screen is in front of the definition, but I'm going to, paraphrase. The Expressionist movement was in response to anxiety and humanity's increasing discordance with the world. And, it's funny, not funny, but kind of ironic, that definition, because this is how I feel when I contemplate the problems with our planet, and maybe you too. I just feel like, what have we done, we humanity? And this lady, looks like she's having some anxious thoughts too. So our Earth is hurting in many ways. What I have on this slide is just a small amount of them, but some of the ones that are very, very serious. I'm sure you know about the changing climate and increasing global temperatures, and this leads to all kinds of effects, including droughts, melting glaciers and melting polar ice caps, and the oceans all absorbing the excess heat and carbon dioxide, which acidifies the oceans. And then some of these effects, all of them really, lead to further effects, like the droughts can lead to wildfires and crop failures, and the melting polar ice caps can lead to flooding and all kinds of problems in the oceans. So these are serious problems. Deforestation is occurring as more and more land gets used to grow crops for animal feed because it's an inefficient process. It takes a lot of crops to feed a small number of animals. Soil degradation is occurring as soil in some parts of the world, many parts of the world, is becoming degraded and just turning kind of to dirt and not having the water content and the nutrient content that we need to grow good, healthy food. Water in many places is polluted with pesticides and fertilizers. We've got a huge problem with plastic pollution. And because of all these environmental problems, there's a rapid loss of biodiversity. Species are dying at unprecedented rates throughout the globe. So we can make an effect. I mean, this is all very, very pessimistic, but we can have an effect by our choices in many ways, including our dietary choices, and that's what we're going to talk about. And this is a beautiful Monet at the Denver Art Museum in Colorado, and I like that this shows what we're trying to save. It's our beautiful planet. I can't think where there could ever be a more beautiful planet. And I love this painting because it shows the sea, the sky with the clouds, the cliffs, the beach, the fields. It's got a bit of everything, almost. So we can all make good food choices that are good for our earth every day. And I always like to emphasize that it's not all or nothing. You know, I'm going to talk about several ideas and several things. You don't have to do them all. You don't have to do them all to their extreme. So for example, you don't have to give up meat entirely if you don't want to. You don't have to, you know, entirely eliminate plastic from your life if you don't want to. I think as we think of the choices, we each do what we feel we can do, and maybe down the road, there's room to make further changes. So this is a painting by Paul Gauguin, French post-impressionist, just of some cattle. So let me just see if I can see this better there. Livestock production requires large quantities of grain. So, you know, producing what we need to raise cattle, for example. In the US, about 45% of our grain produced and used goes to feed cattle. So that's very inefficient because if people were eating those grains, there would be a huge abundance. Cattle and sheep produce a lot of methane, which I'm going to explain in a minute. You may know why already, but they do. The US meat industry, it's fair to say, contributes greatly to the degradation of our land and our water, deforestation, and our warming planet. So this is just an image I took from Wikipedia. If you look up ruminants on Wikipedia, and cattle and sheep are ruminants, it shows this and a few others. There are many ruminants, and I think it's just a gorgeous selection. These are beautiful animals. They look very diverse, but they all have something in common, that they're ruminants, and most of them are not necessarily a big problem for the planet. However, cattle is a big problem. Cattle is a big contributor. Our agricultural system and how we prioritize cattle in the diet is a big problem in terms of climate change. So cattle is a ruminant, as are other bovines, wild bovines like buffalo and bison, sheep, goats, buffalo, deer, elk, giraffe, camels, gazelles, antelopes, and so on. And I'm saying and so on because I was surprised to read that there are approximately 200 species of ruminants. So these are some of the ones that we're more familiar with. So as an animal with one stomach, We cannot digest grass or coarse vegetation, but ruminants can. And this diagram from the University of Minnesota shows, it's confusing, if you're not in veterinary science or something, but a ruminant has basically, it's like having 4 stomachs. It's got 4 stomach compartments. So ruminants, can eat grass and other coarse vegetation. They can and they do. In the rumen, microbes, bacteria, and yeast digest plants by fermentation. So the rumen is like a big fermentation vat. And then you might know that they sometimes, when they're eating, they regurgitate back up what they eat. They chew it some more. That's what's called chewing their cud. They swallow it again. This may go on several times. It sounds kind of gross to us, but it's the way they've evolved. And in the process of this, they belch a lot. And the byproduct of that is methane, a lot of methane. And methane is a potent greenhouse gas that raises global temperatures. And the reason cattle are so problematic is that we have so many of them, far more than there's giraffes or, sheep that are raised, or I don't know, gazelles and things. There's a lot of cattle. I read that in the US alone, there's over 86 million. So just the sheer numbers of them, because our society likes its beef. So, an obvious answer to that is we should all choose lots of plants, which of course is healthy for us anyway. Eating for the health of the planet pretty much aligns with eating for the health of us. So it's a really good idea to choose lots of plants. And that would include, and this is on the handout, fruits and vegetables, grains, ideally whole grains a lot, legumes, which are beans, lentils, peas, nuts and seeds, seaweed, and also mushrooms, which aren't technically a plant. Not all seaweed is technically a plant either, but it doesn't matter. In terms of talking about what we eat, we can think of them all as plants. And this may look like a short list of foods, but when you think about how many there are in each category, how many different fruits and vegetables and grains and so on, this translates into a lot of foods and a lot of recipes. And I think that this painting illustrates that really well. This is by a Ukrainian artist, Katerina Bilokur. She was voted, I think in the 1950s, the People's Artist of Ukraine. She did a lot of folk art. And this, believe it or not, is an oil painting. To me, when I first saw it, I thought, this has to be needlepoint. There's very fine brushwork. But I think it kind of shows the creativity with how fruits and vegetables can be put together. And we can use that same creativity to take lots of plant foods and create wonderful dishes in our own kitchens. And they don't have to be complicated. It's a good idea to choose produce in season, grown near you. Does it have to be everything you buy? Of course not. But I actually think that a lot of us find there's a nice rhythm to the year, like when we choose apples in the fall and the winter, same with, winter squash. And as we get into spring, maybe focusing on asparagus and the tender leafy greens that start to come. And in the summer, the peaches and plums. It just kind of feels right. I think we've evolved that way. Some ways to get produce grown near you is you might purchase from a local farm or other local food producers, people that make honey or whatever. You might consider joining a CSA, community supported agriculture, where it's like you're getting a share of the farm's crop every week during the summer. And then, of course, some supermarkets have sections in their produce department where they sell local food, which is wonderful. And you may have a garden as well. You may grow some of your own food. So lots of ways to get good produce in season. Plants will always have a lower environmental impact than animal products. They differ among each other, but it's always going to have a lower impact when you're choosing lots of plants, which is, again, part of the reason that we should emphasize them on our plates. Fewer natural resources are used to grow plants. Greenhouse gas emissions are lower in the production and transport of plants. There's less use of pesticides and chemical fertilizers and fuel in producing plants. And there's less pollution of water. So yay, plants. So if you are thinking that you need to slant more towards plants, and we can all, hopefully lean in that direction, I want to give you a bit of the terminology. I have a feeling you might know this, but hey, a little review never hurts. When a person is vegan, they exclude all animal products. When someone is vegetarian, they exclude most animal products like meat, but they often include dairy and or eggs. One who is pescatarian excludes animal meat except for fish and shellfish. They've made that choice. And it may be fish or shellfish. It depends on the individual. And flexitarian, or sometimes called plant forward, is when you have a diet rich in plants, but you include small portions of the fish, meat, chicken if you want to. And full transparency here, I'm in the flexitarian group. I try to have a lot of plant-based meals every week, but sometimes I still have especially fish and chicken. It doesn't matter the label. And in fact, people sometimes move between these. I know people who are definitely pescatarian, but they refer to themselves as vegetarian. I know someone who's pescatarian, but on rare occasion wants to have chicken soup. Um, and some people who are vegan sometimes make an exception. They just feel the need for cheese or something. The label doesn't matter. It's fine to be fluid with it. What matters is that it's a great idea to shift in the direction of more plants. I want to list some veggie dishes. There are many veggie dishes. We could probably come up with dozens, but I just want to, point out a few in case you're thinking I would like to have more of these. And I want to mention, and I'll mention this again, legumes and whole grains can form the basis of many healthful meals, extremely healthful food items. And a meal, of course, does not have to contain meat to meet our nutritional needs. So here are some: rice and beans, vegetarian chili, whole wheat macaroni and cheese, lentil soup, tabbouleh, and a bowl, one of those nice bowls that has a grain like brown rice, maybe some lentils, some sauteed greens, and maybe some kind of a nice sauce like a tahini sauce. So I put on your handout, there's a rice and bean recipe. Rice and beans can make such a nice lunch. If you're a person that maybe normally eats a sandwich, but you're getting tired of sandwiches and you want a vegetarian option, rice and beans are nice. And the recipe I put on your handout is easy because it's all cooked in the same pot. You don't have to cook the rice and beans separately, less dishes. Vegetarian chili, well, you may have a chili recipe that, is in your family that you love, and maybe you just try leaving out the meat and putting in extra beans and see what you think. Whole wheat macaroni and cheese. You might wonder, well, that sounds great and that sounds really healthy, but is that going to be enough protein? And I hear you. It's important to get enough protein. Sometimes what I do, often what I do, if I have a plant-based meal, something like that, and I suspect it's not really enough protein, I will have a protein on the side. For example, yogurt or cottage cheese, if you eat those. That's a good way to get a lot of protein in a little side dish, and then you can have your macaroni and cheese and your vegetables and call it a meal. You could also put the cottage cheese, for example, into the macaroni and cheese and cook it that way, and it kind of melts and gets a little stringy and very nice. I do that in lasagna. Tabbouleh is great, made with bulgur wheat and parsley and olive oil and lemon and tomatoes. Great example of a nice whole grain dish. Oh, this is a painting of beans. Beautiful depiction of beans going way back. Giovanna Garzoni, Italian artist. back from the 1650s to 1660s. So this is back when still life painting was kind of getting started, and she really got it. She mastered it. And again, beans are always an excellent choice. Whether you're vegetarian, flexitarian, however you're eating, beans for the planet require much less water to grow than animal foods and even grains. They tend to be drought tolerant. And they do something called fixing the nitrogen in the soil, so it reduces the need for fertilizer. So great planetary choice, all kinds of beans. For us, beans are good for protein, fiber, vitamins, minerals, and great phytochemicals that act as antioxidants. So they're good for us, they're good for the planet, and they're so pretty. Look at all the different colors and sizes and shapes they come in. And think about if you have a bean recipe you like, maybe somewhere tucked away among your recipes, you've got, a casserole with beans or a soup with beans that you would like to pull out again. Oh, and this is the recipe that's in the handout. I'm not going to dwell on that because I already talked about it. Okay, I happen to think tofu and broccoli stir fry is one of the greatest dishes for a lunch or a dinner. Comes together very quickly, especially if you happen to have some leftover brown rice or quinoa or something in your fridge to put it on. Here I put in some cashews and chopped onion and just, I usually use olive oil these days because that's a very healthy oil, but you could use peanut oil, avocado oil, whatever you want. Flavor with ginger, garlic, a little soy sauce, whatever you want. So let's say you're thinking, but I want some beef, and again, fine. It's what matters is that maybe we all shift more towards plants, but you don't have to give up anything you don't want to. Just be aware, as you may be, that conventional beef, most of the beef that you see like in your supermarket, comes from what's called a concentrated animal feeding operation, abbreviated CAFO, sometimes called a factory farm. These cattle are fed grain, often it's corn or soy. That is not what cattle have evolved to eat. They've evolved to eat grass. They get ulcers from this and suffer from this. The waste is poorly managed. It often washes off into nearby ditches and streams. There's so many hundreds of thousands of cattle in these feedlots. They live in very crowded, unsanitary, unhappy conditions. And there is an alternative. And of course, it's grass-fed beef. I do realize it costs a little more, but ruminants belong on grass. It's a better life for the cow. It's healthier beef for us. It's got more omega-3 fatty acids, which are anti-inflammatory. And it's much better for the soil. The cattle actually help the cycle. They fertilize the soil. So it's the kind of the way nature intended it. Okay, and I am very aware, acutely aware, that many of the recipes we love include ground meat. Whether it's a lasagna or you're making meatballs or shepherd's pie or anything, so many recipes. So we can extend our ground meat. If we're dealing with a recipe where we don't want to give it up altogether, consider reducing it by a half or a third. And then you can add, of course, beans. You can add textured vegetable protein, which is shown in the slide here. This is Bob's Red Mill, TVP. Textured vegetable protein is soy protein. Perfectly healthy, provided you don't have a soy allergy. And you add it in the last, I feel like 7 to 9 minutes of cooking. You might need to add a little extra water, or you could hydrate it in a bowl with water and add it to whatever you're cooking. You could also add chopped mushrooms. The mushroom industry is pushing this with good reason. Chopped mushrooms have that nice savory taste that meat often has, and they've got a nice texture. And of course, any kind of chopped veggies you want can be added to whatever it is you're cooking. Here's another interesting painting. This is by Jamie Wyeth, who happened happened to be the grandson. Oh, I think I've got that wrong. I think the son of Andrew Wyeth, who painted the very famous Christina's World um, in Maine. Anyway, Jamie Wyeth painted this of a mushroom picker working in, one of those I'm going to say mushroom caves, like kind of underground where mushrooms are grown in a controlled environment. And I think it's a very interesting painting, and the mushrooms are clearly the star here. You can barely see the person, but the mushrooms shine, and mushrooms are very good for us and a good way to help you cut back on meat if you choose. And now seafood. There's a lot we could say about seafood and what's happening in the oceans. Mainly, I want you to be aware of this site. You can get it as an app, or you can go on your laptop to the site, the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch, and definitely the reference is on your handout. If you like seafood, but you're concerned about overfishing and how some of them are being, dying out and everything, this site will tell you. You can plug in the name of any kind of fish you can think of, and it will tell you which ones are the good choices, or maybe it's not a good choice at all from a sustainability standpoint, but knowledge is power. So here's some of them that they are saying are good choices. There are others, of course, but a lot of salmon, fortunately, is a good sustainable choice. Skipjack tuna, farmed mussels and clams, the bivalves like that, don't take a lot of resources to grow. So those are good choices. Rainbow trout, Alaska flounder and sole, U.S. farmed striped bass, and Arctic char. And again, there are others. Can't go into them all now, but if you're a fish lover, take a look at that site, or at least this list. And then sea vegetables, otherwise known as seaweed, algae. There's hundreds of varieties. People have eaten them for thousands of years, and people eat them today. If you eat sushi, you have it, wrapped in seaweed, and you can buy packs of seaweed as snacks. And I hope we're going to see more of these because they require minimal resources to grow. They're sustainable. They have a lot of vitamins and minerals. They reduce carbon dioxide in the oceans. They sequester it. So they're really good. The only potential downside that I'm aware of is they can sequester heavy metals. So it's not a good idea to eat massive amounts every day, or if you eat seafood regularly, vary your types. And then that should take care of that. And then, of course, for our health and for the health of our planet, we should choose less processed foods. It takes more resources, more land, more water, more energy to produce these foods. Look at all the packaging on this, package of Hot Pockets, and this is just one of thousands of examples of processed foods. But there's a lot of packaging. All that has a carbon footprint. I love this painting. This is by Meyer de Haan, a Dutch artist. It just shows the beauty of unprocessed, fresh, natural food. I love especially how he depicted the onions, all different colors when you look at them. And that's how food is. Food is beautiful and colorful, and that's what we need. Good whole food. So I'm going to switch gears. I've been talking about healthy food choices that we can make. I hope that was helpful. I'm going to now talk about reducing food waste. Food waste is a really big problem. You've probably heard this. Globally, 1/3 of all food that's produced for human consumption is wasted each year. How could that be? And in the US, we're right in that. An estimated 30 to 40% of the food supply gets wasted. Maybe you've sometimes seen behind a supermarket or a restaurant dumpsters, a lot of food gets tossed out. So we've probably all been in this situation where, something in our kitchen, something in a refrigerator is going bad. We don't mean to have that happen, but things get pushed to the back. We forgot we bought them. We meant to use them. Life happens. What can we do? First of all, we can join the ugly produce movement. There's nothing you have to join, although there are sites that sell ugly produce. What this refers to is we've become conditioned as Americans to think that our food has to look impeccable. It doesn't actually have to look perfect to be good. Like this pear, for example, would be completely edible and probably delicious, but many people would toss that out or not choose to buy it. This painting by one Sarah Miriam Peel. This is actually at the Harvard Art Museums. It's possible some of you have seen this. She was part of the very talented Peel family. There's a lot of artists that were in that family. This painting of watermelon and peaches and grapes and some other melon, in the little blurb by the painting at the museum, it's mentioned how perfect everything is. So she captured that really well. But again, we don't have to have our produce be 100% perfect to eat it. We shouldn't toss it if there's one little spot that we could just cut out. This one kind of illustrates that. This is James Peel. I'm not sure whether he was her cousin or uncle. They were related, but it was, again, a big family of artists. Look how in his apples, especially the one on the table or counter, how there are some spots that, you could easily take a knife and cut out or bite off and toss. So we shouldn't automatically think that food like that needs to be thrown out. And I love that he chose to paint that. It's so realistic. You can practice what's called zero waste cooking. The name is probably self-evident. How can you use as much of your food as possible? What we should all do before we shop is take inventory. We should look in our fridge, our pantry, our cupboards, wherever we keep food, and say, what do I have that I can use that maybe I can build around to make a nice meal? Plan meals using what you have. So we've probably all cooked too much pasta. And then you've got pasta sitting in a bowl in your fridge. So there's a couple things that can happen. We can find it several days later and say, oh, I think it's got to go. I forgot about it for, a week and a half or something. It's got to go. Or we can say, I wonder what I can do tomorrow or the next day with that pasta to make maybe a slightly different meal, but use it. Could I saute some veggies and put it with that and make a side dish or some kind of a main dish? Also, sometimes we buy an ingredient for a recipe. We might buy a special chili paste or a type of oil or some, type of nut we don't usually buy for a recipe, and we use it, and then we forget we have it because we're not always making that recipe. So try to remember what you have, what you've bought, and think, how else can I use that? Or did I like that recipe? Maybe I'll make it again. So that, 2 years from now, you're not finding it in your fridge and saying, oh, now I have to throw them out. They're too old. Okay. And then, of course, eat leftovers. Some of us think that leftovers are just wonderful, happy to eat them as they are, or create something new. So yesterday's roasted chicken can become part of a salad or a bowl the next day. Use the plant, whatever the plant is, from root to leaf. So, you may have discovered this, but there's a lot of plants, beets, radishes, carrots, that sometimes we purchase, or definitely if we grow them, that have greens. And these greens are usually edible. So use everything, experiment, saute, steam. With leeks and scallions, I've been just surprised to discover that a lot of people think the dark green tops are not good. They are perfectly good, whether they're going into a salad or being sauteed or whatever you're doing with them. The dark green tops are good. Broccoli stems, you know how sometimes your broccoli has a long stem? You can slice that up thin into salads. Very good sliced into a stir fry, cooks up nicely. And with squash, or, your pumpkin at Halloween. Roast the seeds. When you roast squash, you can usually eat the skin. It's edible as long as you don't personally find it to be too tough. So try to enjoy the whole thing. Food that we find in our fridge that seems to be on its way out. Again, of course, this happens to all of us. And, the good news is it's not quite done. It just maybe has one day left. First of all, put it front and center in your fridge. If you see it, you'll remember, oh, I have to use that celery or whatever it is. If it's kind of out of sight behind the milk and everything, you might forget you have it. Wilting lettuce and wilting celery can revive in ice water. Just stick it in a glass of ice water at, the base of it, and it often comes back. It's pretty incredible. If you have some vegetables that are on their way out, cook them up with some herbs and add them to a tomato sauce and make a rich marinara sauce. Even if you're not planning on using it right away, you could freeze it, and that'll be great. Having a marinara sauce in your freezer to pull out some happy evening. And if you've got fruit that's on its way out, freeze it for smoothies, or if you're not a smoothie person, freeze it and find some other way to use it. Like, let's say, for example, it was pineapple. You might add it to a stir fry or a pizza or a chicken dish. I find that those lovely clementines that you buy in big bags, if I don't eat them fairly quickly, after a few days, they start to they're going. Like, I feel like they have one more day. I can always tell there's a ever so slightly fermented smell, but they're still okay. That tells me I need to peel them, all of them, put them in the segments in a bowl in the freezer, and then they're actually delicious as a frozen snack on their own, and they're also good in a smoothie. I'm sure some of you have some other great ideas. I can feel you thinking bananas, freeze bananas for smoothies or banana bread, and lots of other things we can do. Veggie scraps, if you're really motivated, we cook and there's veggie scraps. They can become a nice veggie stock to use in your other cooking something else. So you can keep a container, some kind of a bowl in your freezer if you have room, and put in bits of mushrooms, like the little end of the stem that you might have thrown away, onion skin, yeah, the peel, carrot peels, the heavy ribs from kale or Swiss chard, ends of celery that might be a tad bitter, something you were going to toss. Keep it in your freezer and then make yourself a nice veggie stock. Just simmer it for a while, and you'll have a nice stock that you can then use as a basis for a stew or a soup. And then, end of the line, when you've used everything you can, anything left, if you have the ability, and I know not everybody can do this. Maybe, if you live in an apartment or something, you may not have the ability to do this, but if you can, composting is just great. Composting returns it to the soil. It feeds the good soil microbes, the food, as they break it down, and they transform this organic matter into good, nutrient-rich soil. Healthy soil grows healthy food. And even if you're not going to use the soil, it's still good. It's better than having it go in a landfill. It decreases the need for synthetic fertilizers. If you are going to use the soil, it's very healthy. And it reduces the methane gas emissions. If it does, when we put food scraps into garbage and it goes to landfills, in those conditions, it produces a lot of methane, but not in a compost pile. Okay, I hope that's been helpful about things you can do in your kitchen. Let me see how I'm doing for time. Oh, good, we're fine. Now I'm going to talk about the third topic, which is reducing non-food waste, in particular in our kitchens. A lot of things we can do. A lot of stuff gets thrown out. This makes me so sad, and I debate showing it, but I feel like I have to because this is the reality. So much plastic gets thrown out. Every year, this is according to a wonderful organization called the Ocean Conservancy. Every year, 11 million metric tons of plastics enter our oceans. It's such a large number, it's hard to contemplate, but according to them, that's like dumping one New York City garbage truck full of plastic into the ocean every minute of every day for an entire year. It's a mind-boggling amount. And this, I believe this is a sea otter. This shows you, some of the tragedy of what happens to animals. So sad. And this only shows you the outside. I'm sure you've heard that plastics degrade into microplastics, microscopic particles that we can't see, but they're being found in all kinds of places that we don't want them to be. So they're on the inside, they're on the outside. So you may have seen this comic. I came across this somewhere, and I just had to show it. A dog saying, and they still haven't realized that the problem, it's them. And people get so upset about seeing a dog running around, but the pollution that we as people cause is so much more serious. So anyway, the top 4 most widespread plastic items in the Earth's oceans are single-use bags, plastic bottles, food containers, and food wrappers. So this all has to do with food. I mean, there's a lot of plastic in other things that in our lives, but so much is coming from kitchens, restaurant kitchens, our kitchens, having to do with food. So we can have an impact, each of us in our very small way, but if enough of us do something about it, we can have an impact. And of course, the problem isn't just in the oceans. All the waterways on Earth, rivers, lakes, streams, and land is polluted with plastic. The long-term solution, what has to happen is we need to move away from single-use plastic. Single-use plastic shouldn't even be a term. It should never be single-use. This is the man, his name is Sten Gustaf Thulin, Swedish engineer. He invented the plastic bag in 1959, and he was environmentally conscious. His son talks about it, I guess now. He did it as an alternative to paper bags. He was concerned about the number of trees that get cut down to produce paper for paper bags. So he invented the plastic bag to help save the planet. Such an irony. Unfortunately, and he didn't anticipate this at all, people would come to see them as single-use items. His son says that he always carried a plastic bag in his pocket for use for anything he had to cart around, but he never would have thought of it as a single-use item. So, we have to get our stuff home somehow from the grocery store and, the mall and wherever it is we're shopping. The key is, I think, to reuse bags. Whatever bags you have that keep you from taking a new bag or buying a new bag, we should use what we have, whether that is paper and plastic bags that we already have on hand, whether that's freebie bags, you went to a race, or you went to Macy's and bought makeup and it came in a bag. Whatever bags we have, let's try to think of them as I'm going to use it as long as I possibly can. If you really don't have any bags, then the bags you purchase or get should be reusable. And then, of course, for produce in supermarkets and farmers markets, let's try to use mesh produce bags or something that's reusable. It just kills me when I see people just tearing off the plastic from the rolls in the supermarkets without seeming to realize that they're going to throw that away. It's very thin, like a film of plastic. That's going to end up in the water. Yeah, don't do it. Here's a very interesting painting. This artist is Janet Fish. I believe that she might have lived and worked on the Cape for a point, but I'm not 100% sure, so I shouldn't have even said it. She's a contemporary American realist artist born in, I believe, the 1930s and still out there. She has such a genius for painting things you can see through, like glass or a plastic film, like on this painting of a package of peaches. So I just think that's spectacular the way she depicted that. However, it's what we shouldn't buy. When we have a choice, we should purchase our produce without wrappers, if we have a choice. So here, here I have from a couple of years ago a selection of tomatoes at Trader Joe's. The Trader Joe's near me. I live in Northborough near Worcester, so this is in Shrewsbury, but you know, all stores have displays like this. Which are the best tomatoes? The best tomatoes are the ones that are unwrapped, and I wouldn't take a bag. If I didn't have my mesh produce bags with me, I just bring them up to the register unwrapped. I want you to know that's an option. You're going to wash them when you get them home anyway. So the best tomatoes, you know, are not necessarily the ones the recipe calls for or whatever. The best ones are the unwrapped ones. You get the idea for all produce if you can do it, when you can do it. And, you know, we can vote for less packaging with our wallet. We can try to let companies and supermarkets know that's what we want, less packaging, because it really is disheartening how much there is. And we should try to reuse our resources. And I bet you listening are a wealth of information about how we can do that. There's so much that we can reuse. Let's see. I wanted to show you a couple things. Devin, am I visible to people? I'm going to hold off on that for a moment. But reusing our resources like foil, plastic bags, nice jars for storing things in, reusing when we can items in our kitchen.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so let me show you a couple things. And I believe you're probably all doing some of these, and you probably have other creative ideas, but this is a lid from a yogurt, like this kind of a container. And so if you buy yogurt, you might buy this. These lids, now this is a number 5. So 5s are not recyclable. If it's plastic and it doesn't have a 1 or a 2, it's got no chance of being recycled. But what I have found with lids like this is putting them on top of mugs, on top of bowls, not to microwave. I never microwave plastic, but to store things in my fridge. It takes away the need for plastic wrap. Just cover things with something like that. Then the whole container, as a matter of fact. My mind, when I think about stuff like this, I go to grandparents. Our grandparents would probably be appalled that we would throw something like this out. You know, like the yogurt's done, I'm going to throw it in the container. This is a great container. Like there's so many, you could take this berry picking, you could store food in it, you could bring home leftovers in it. Now, I'm perfectly aware that there's only so many of these that you can use. Once you have like 3 or 4 of them, you probably have enough. But let's reuse what we can. Foil, I've discovered, and maybe you have too, foil can be reused. Now, am I going to reuse this if I had it over raw fish marinating and it was touching the fish? No, I'm not. But if I have it over a plate of muffins, a salad, you know, some veggies I chopped, I'm definitely going to give it a quick rinse and reuse it. This piece, you know, has seen many, many, many uses. Like why throw it away? And there's so many things. This is like a bag that Wegmans brown rice comes in, a perfectly good Ziploc plastic bag. You know, once it's empty, reuse it for other things and wash it out and reuse it again. And one of my favorite, what is this? This is plastic silverware. I hope we get to a day, well, I hope we get to a day when it no longer exists. But while it does exist, if you have it, like if you have it in your home, and let's say you're going to have a barbecue this summer and there's a lot of people, so you want to use something that you have a lot of. We should try to think of these as not single use. Just like we wouldn't throw away our stainless flatware, these can be washed and reused. Let's try not to think of that as something to put in the garbage because we know how it's going to end up. Okay. Thank you for humoring me on all that. And then I wanted to mention think about how can we try to influence people kindly? You may be already doing all this that I've mentioned and a lot more. You may be way ahead of me.
Hey,
Uh,
Judy.
yes.
Sorry, I just want to make sure people are seeing your slide is prominent because I had you pinned for a second showing your reusable items. Can people see the slide as a large image again? Could someone let us know? Okay,
Yes.
great.
Yes.
Thanks, Tammy.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't have one single answer for this, how we can try to influence people, but I think maybe, kindly realizing that not everybody might have the knowledge you have or the concern that you have, but letting people know. I just remember being in someone's kitchen not long ago where we had had dinner and this wonderful lady was tearing off piece after piece after piece of saran wrap to cover everything. And I'm thinking, oh, I could tell you so many ways. Just take a plate and put it over that bowl. But I couldn't think of the right way to do it in that circumstance. But it's something that I think we have to talk about when we feel the time is right with other people. Okay. Dining out, there's choices we can make when we dine out. This is a picture of a somewhat compostable, I believe, container. Let's see. Okay, so one thing we can do, like if we're going to something like a coffee shop, is bring our own coffee mug. Most of them are back to letting us use them, not all, which is really annoying, but there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to bring our own refillable mug. Carry a spork or in some way try to avoid single-use plasticware. Decline the bag of condiments that comes with some types of food unless you want them. But if you don't want them and you're in the household where they just get thrown out or saved and in your spice cabinet and then a year later they get thrown out, decline it. Just decline it. Decline the straw, decline the stirrer. It's as simple as saying no straw, please. Encourage better takeout containers. A lot of places are still using totally plastic takeout containers. Really not good. There are compostable containers, and even if they don't get composted, which chances are they're not going to if you don't have access to industrial composting, it's still better than the plastic. Even better is to bring your own container. If you think of it, just keep one in your car or something like that. There are some enlightened places, not where I live, but there are enlightened places, I think, as you get closer to Cambridge and Boston, that are experimenting with programs where they actually send food home with you in a real dish and you bring it back the next time you come. Wonderful idea. Okay. I saw this, there are places that are doing very well. I saw this at the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum in Tucson, Arizona last year when I was fortunate enough to be there. They had a sign in their cafeteria that said, "To protect animal welfare, we do not offer straws or lids for beverages." I thought that was great. Any little steps are good. Just like maybe two more paintings. So this is a painting that hangs in the Worcester Art Museum. This is by Ralph Earl from 1800, looking east from an area in Worcester called Denny Hill. And I'm just struck by how much, of course, how much change occurs in, a 200 plus year time period. But look how rural I'm sure the sky looked different back then before the burning of fossil fuels so much. You know, things change so much, and this just shows us a time of great beauty. And finally, this very strange painting by Giuseppe Arcimboldo, Italian artist, from 1563. This actually hangs in the Louvre in Paris. He actually had several of these paintings where he takes objects from nature and he fashions them into a human form. I think they're weird. I can't say I love this. It's not that it's beautiful, but I'm showing it because it really shows the relationship between food and nature and us, humanity. And it shows it in a very vivid way. So healthy planet equals healthy all of us and all life on Earth. We can't truly be healthy without a healthy planet. So what I'd like you to be thinking of is what actions you can take, um, and also be very proud of yourself for all the wonderful actions that you probably are already doing for our planet. And with that, I thank you, and I'd be happy to try to hear any comments or answer any questions if anyone has any.